Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our live session today. My name is Larissa. I'm an event planner at Reactor, joining you from Brazil. Before we start, I have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. The session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand here on the Reactor YouTube channel within 48 hours. Keep an eye on the chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for your questions. I will now turn it over to our speaker for today. So thank you all and welcome, Josh.
Right. Thank you so much, Larissa, for the warm introduction. And hi, everyone. Thank you for hanging out with us today as we talk a lot more about OneLake. This is our second session on the OneLake series. If you're joining here for the first time, please introduce yourself. I have my colleague on chat, Someleza is on chat. Any questions you might be having, he will be helping you answer them, and probably at the very end, any unanswered questions, I might be able to pick it up and also address that. So thank you so much for joining. This is going to take us around 40 minutes to 1 hour. So we'll talk about OneLake shortcuts and mirroring within OneLake. Last week, we did talk about governance and we did talk about the OneLake catalog. We explored the secure access within OneLake, and today we'll be looking more around shortcuts and mirroring. And this is just a few of the ways in which you bring your data into OneLake. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh, and before I continue, my name is Josh. I'm a cloud developer advocate here at Microsoft. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn after this in case you still have any further questions around the same topic. And also, quick housekeeping: next week we still have one more session as part of this series. Now, to get started, when you think about OneLake, at its core, OneLake is a single unified SaaS data lake that is automatically provisioned for you within your Microsoft Fabric tenant. So when you think about OneLake, you do not need to have any setup or any provisioning or additional infrastructure for you to set up. As long as you have your Microsoft Fabric tenant, OneLake is automatically deployed or it's automatically provisioned within your Microsoft Fabric tenant. And OneLake, you just have one lake. That's why it's OneLake across your entire organization. So you do not need to provision multiple data storage or data stores for your storage needs within Microsoft Fabric. And then all of the various workloads inside of Microsoft Fabric, they store their data inside of OneLake by default. That means whether you're doing data integration with Data Factory or you're doing data engineering, data science, or data warehousing, all these workloads that roll up to the analytics workload, or they're using databases, real-time intelligence, Fabric IQ, or you're doing analytics with Power BI, all these workloads natively store their data inside of OneLake by default. And this ensures that every team that is working inside of Microsoft Fabric works from the same trusted foundation of your data without data duplication or complex integrations. And when you also think about governance and security and protection, all of these are also built into the platform from the start. And therefore, you have features like data lineage, data certification, the catalog integration, some of which we've covered as part of this series. And all of these have a tight integration within OneLake so that you're able to have a clear view of where your data lives and how your data is actually being used and who is actually who has access to your data. And beyond just having a clear view, you also have controls that can allow you to configure the same. You can be able to configure who has access to what. You're able to configure things like, column level security for your tables, row level security for your tables, conditional access. All of that you're able to set up within OneLake. So you have built-in governance, built-in indexing and lineage. and also data and also protection within OneLake. The other thing, at the same time, OneLake also supports distributed ownership, and this allows teams to operate independently while still contributing to the same shared data lake. So you have a balance of central oversight and local autonomy that makes it very simple to be able to scale across large and complex organizations. Um, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my slides here. Just a minute. All right, yeah, moving now. Yeah, so when you're talking about, we've already talked about what OneLake is. It's this infinite data storage layer inside of Microsoft Fabric, and all these different workloads within Fabric can be able to store their data within OneLake. But how do you actually bring your data into OneLake? So in many cases, you already have your data and your operations running either on other services, could be on Microsoft services, on Azure, or even on other vendors. And we need to talk about how you actually bring your data into OneLake. And just going back to the previous slide just a bit, Data Factory allows you to do a lot of integration in terms of how you bring your data into OneLake. We have very many different ways, and today we'll be looking at two ways and just drilling down into these two ways in terms of how we bring data into OneLake. But just to provide some bit of background and some bit of context, beyond mirroring and shortcuts, which is what you're going to talk a lot about today, you have different ways in which you can bring data into OneLake. Using Data Factory, you can be able to build your pipelines. You can be able to build your pipelines and copy data from different sources, do some bit of transformation and load that data into OneLake. So you're able to build these ETL pipelines. And with the Data Factory, we have over 140 different connectors. That means virtually anywhere your data resides, we can be able to connect to that source, integrate to that, and build your ETL pipelines and bring your data into OneLake. We also have the data flows as well as part of the Data Factory workload. And you also, with using data flows, you have this low-code canvas that allows you to do the same, connect to data sources. You can do some bit of transformation in a low-code canvas, and you can be able to load that data into OneLake. And so that's how so when we think about OneLake, you have the capability to connect to your existing estate, and that's what I've been talking around Data Factory, your ability to connect and integrate to your already existing sources. And in that case, you might do some data movement. You might do some data movement from those sources into OneLake. But in some cases, you might want to connect data without data movement or data duplication, where you completely do zero migrations, and existing sources, you can continue managing those sources externally, but still bring that data into OneLake. So that's one possibility. But also the other possibility is you also have the ability to physically store your data inside of OneLake. The storage offered here, it's again offered to you as software as a service. Therefore, you can also store data as well into OneLake, and OneLake should be able to meet any demand for any scale of data that you're actually bringing into Microsoft Fabric. So regardless of where your data is, whether you want to connect to an existing data estate, or you want to actually build your data estate completely from scratch within Microsoft Fabric, all of this works. And it doesn't matter where all of this is coming, you still get the same capabilities that I've talked in terms of governance and security. All of the data that comes into OneLake, you still have the same controls for governance and even for security. And so when you think about OneLake security, when you think about governance, whether you're connecting to an existing estate or whether you're working with data or you're building your estate directly inside of Microsoft Fabric, you still have the same level of control, and you still have the same access in terms of what you're able to do in terms of security and governance. So when you think about the various ways that I've mentioned in terms of you of you being able to bring data into Microsoft Fabric, or rather into OneLake. I mentioned you have the ability to bring data into OneLake without migration, without data movement, without data duplication, and those two ways are the ones that we're going to explore in depth in the next 40 or so minutes. And the two main ways we are exploring are mainly shortcuts and mirroring. And so let's talk a little bit more about shortcuts and mirroring, and afterwards we're going to do a few demos just to showcase how all these actually work. Now, when you think about shortcuts, shortcuts are going to provide connections between domains and clouds, so that data can be virtualized into a single, your data can be virtualized into OneLake without data movement, or without data duplication, or even without changing the ownership of your data. So when you think about a shortcut inside of OneLake, a shortcut is nothing more than just a symbolic link that is going to be pointing from one data location to another data location. So just think the same way you will create a shortcut on your desktop, on your Windows device or your Linux device. When you create that shortcut, for example, let's say you create that shortcut on your desktop, the data is going to appear in the shortcut location as if it were there. So if you open that shortcut on your desktop, if you open it, you're going to see the data showing up there as if it were physically there. But in the real sense, you actually didn't need to move this data from the source to where you're actually showing it, and therefore it's just you're just virtualizing the source data into your destination. And so most of you ideally could be having existing data in possibly in different data lakes. Maybe you could be having your data stored in ADLS Gen 2 on Azure, or in Amazon S3 buckets, and therefore you are able to create, you get the capability to create shortcuts into these data lakes, and this allows you to have a scenario where you have multi-cloud shortcuts. So you have a shortcut maybe on ADLS Gen 2, you have a shortcut on Amazon S3 buckets, and so you're able to start having multi-cloud shortcuts, and these lakes can continue existing and continue being managed externally to Microsoft Fabric. So you don't have to move your data from S3, you don't need to move your data from ADLS or from Azure Storage. Your data continues to exist and to be managed externally to Microsoft Fabric, and then all of that data is mapped in OneLake. All that data becomes mapped in a unified namespace and can be accessed using the same APIs, including the ADLS Gen 2 API. So you're able to start doing interesting things, like you're able to do multi-cloud querying from the same pane of glass within Microsoft Fabric. The other way that you can bring in your data without necessarily having to build complex ETL pipelines to bring your data into OneLake is through mirroring. Now, mirroring is a no ETL experience that allows you to add proprietary databases or data warehouses into Microsoft Fabric. So depending on your data source here, is going to be dependent heavily on your data source. Depending on your data source, mirroring can either replicate your entire database into Microsoft Fabric, or just keep the metadata inside of OneLake in Delta Packet tables, and then keep that data in sync in near real time. And so we currently have built-in mirrored sources, so you can be able to, those that are already built into the platform, such as Cosmos DB, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, Azure PostgreSQL, Azure Databricks, Snowflake, and we have more and more, and the list of the built-in mirrored sources is continually growing. And we also believe we might not be able to build all your mirrored sources at the same speed that you want to have these mirrored sources supported inside of Microsoft Fabric, and that's why we have the capability. We have a capability known as open mirroring, and open mirroring allows you to create custom mirroring experiences for your own application. So in the cases where you want to mirror a database, your proprietary database, you want to mirror that into Microsoft Fabric or rather into OneLake, and that is not supported out of the box inside of Microsoft Fabric, we provide you with open mirroring that allows you to build your custom mirroring experiences on top of your own applications. And so when we talk about these two ways to bring your data into OneLake, as I mentioned, between mirroring and shortcuts, you can connect to almost all of your data sources with no ETL required. So for both shortcuts and mirroring shortcuts, there's no data that is being moved. You're just virtualizing that data source into OneLake. With mirroring, we're maintaining a mirrored replica inside of OneLake, and you're not charged. You're not charged for the mirrored replica inside of OneLake up to a particular. I think it's up to 1 TB per capacity unit, if I'm not wrong. And so that mirrored replica inside of Microsoft Fabric, you're not charged for that, whether you're using the built-in mirroring sources or you're using open mirroring. The mirrored replica is not the storage for the mirrored replica is not charged for you to you. And so you're able to build, or you're able to bring your data into OneLake with zero ETL, and anything that you can see here, these are some of our mirror shortcut and mirroring sources. Anything else that is not supported here, you definitely can be able to use the data factory workload to do data integration to those sources. But we are continuously increasing, or rather increasing the number of mirroring sources and shortcut sources that are actually supported. And you might be asking, why would I need to consider shortcuts or mirroring? Because and the answer to that is, traditionally, when you needed to do data integration to some of these sources, you needed to build complex ETL pipelines so that you can be able to bring in data. And beyond just building these complex ETL pipelines, you also needed to manage how you sync these two sources. And so with mirroring and shortcuts, you really just need to forget your complex and cumbersome ETL pipelines and your out-of-date copies of your data. You don't have to worry about your data silos. Once you just have to point your data, like for example, with shortcuts, you just need to point your data, and that works. And for example, if I've created a shortcut to the S3 bucket or to ADLS, if something changes in that shortcut, for example, I add a new file, or a new file is deleted, you don't have to manually handle the synchronization of that happens automatically for you. Likewise with the mirroring sources, the moment something changes on your source database, that is automatically replicated inside of OneLake. But we also take this a step further beyond just doing shortcuts. When we announced shortcuts a while back, it was just creating a shortcut to your source, and then that is virtualized inside of OneLake. But we thought maybe we can go a step further with that. And here comes shortcut transformations. And what shortcut transformations allow you to do is they allow you to do transformation on top of your data as you're bringing it into OneLake. And so what that means is I can be having CSV files inside of, let's say, inside of Azure storage, and I want to create a shortcut to those CSV files into OneLake. But when that data lands into OneLake, when the CSV files land into OneLake, I would want to transform those into Delta tables so that I can continue with possibly analytics downstream, or they can be consumed for other workloads, either data engineering, data science downstream. So I'll need to convert those into Delta Packet, or the Delta Packet format. So instead of me having to bring in the CSV files and do the transformation inside of OneLake, we thought maybe we can simplify this process for you. So if you're bringing, for example, If you bring in, for example, a CSV file, what if we just do the transformation for you on the fly? And even in the future, if you added a new CSV file into OneLake, we're gonna do that automatically for you, and so you don't have to think about that yourself. So the data that actually lands inside of OneLake is the complete transformed delta tables for you inside of OneLake. And so that's what shortcut transformations actually do, and we're gonna see this in a quick demo. And so with and so that's the first part. You have shortcut transforms, but then beyond shortcut transforms, we also thought possibly we can take this a step further and add AI, enhance the shortcut transformations with AI, and that comes AI shortcut transforms. Now, shortcut transforms, they can help you to do things like converting your package to tables, your CSV files to tables, Excel files to tables, JSON to tables. That's basically shortcut transforms. But then we can also take these a step further with AI shortcut transforms. And what AI shortcut transforms do is we can be able to do some of the tasks that you have to do with the data when it comes. Like, for example, you're working with some text files and they have some PII information. You'd want the PII redacted before maybe your data engineers start interacting with these data, or maybe you're working with data that is in different languages, and you would want to translate all of that into one language before people start other people start working with that data downstream. What if when you're creating these shortcuts, we can do these transformations for you on the fly? So that's where AI shortcut transforms come. And so you're able, we have these 7 capabilities for AI shortcut transforms that are currently available today, where you can do PII detection, you can do translation from one language to another, you can do text summarization, you can do sentiment analysis, you can do key phrase extractions, and you do not have to write any single line of code for you to do this. And that means the data, when it lands into OneLake, you've already done the transforms without needing to do any complex, without needing to build any complex ETL pipelines. And so for the AI-powered transformations, such as summarization, translation, as I've mentioned, all of these are powered by Azure AI Foundry. And so just with a few clicks, you're able to virtualize your data inside of OneLake and make it ready for analytics or even for AI downstream. And just before we jump into our demos, something else just to mention. I did mention that all Fabric workloads, they can store and retrieve data into OneLake. So data integration with Data Factory is going to store its data in OneLake, whether it's the Fabric databases, the real-time intelligence workload, all of these workloads, they can store their data in OneLake. But we also do have other platforms that can also store their data, into OneLake. And so, for example, you can have things like Dataverse shortcuts that can allow you to work with all your Dynamics data inside of OneLake without needing to do any form of data movement. And you also have these different other services that can be able to store their data natively inside of OneLake. For example, Snowflake. And so all of the data that is then stored inside of OneLake, it's stored without the need to have additional resources to manage whether it's governance or security or even monitoring. And all of those tools are provided to you out of the box. And I know those are some of the questions sometimes people will ask is, for example, I've done my shortcut, I've connected my shortcut, and these shortcuts showing up in OneLake, I need to monitor that, or if it's the mirroring, I need to monitor that. You get tools that can allow you to monitor the replication, whether it's for mirroring or even for shortcuts. So I think it's easy for me to talk so much about these tools and the various capabilities here, but I think it's only fair if I switched over to my browser. If I switched over to my browser and did a quick demo the same. Right. So for my demo here, I'm gonna have just a very simple demo just to kind of showcase everything that I've talked about, just to show you how shortcut transforms or shortcuts actually work, shortcut transforms work, and also how mirroring and open mirroring actually works inside of Microsoft Fabric. So over here, I'm in my Azure portal, and I have a store. I have this blob storage that has just one container. So inside here we have a container called Stadium Demo, and inside the Stadium Demo, we have two folders inside here. The first folder is the historical turnstiles, and then we also have the steward incidents, and we're going to use these as part of the demo that I'm going to be showcasing. So now the scenario here is consider a football club that has a central stadium operations team, and the stadium operations team has a separate match day analytics team. And so basically, we want the data for the data for this football club is stored as unstructured data inside of blob storage. So they have their turnstile events that are continuously uploaded as CSV files. So from their operational applications, all their turnstile events are stored as CSV files, and they are dropped into this storage blob container. And we also have another container. We also have the other folder that also has the steward incidents, and all the steward incidents are dropped here as TXT files. And these TXT files, some of them do contain PII, and I think I can try to show you. Let me see if I'm able to show you the contents of this. Let's see. Let me bring my screen over here just so that we can explore the data and just understand the kind of data that we are working with. So I'm using the Azure extension on VS Code just so that not Foundry, just so that we can explore the data here. And this is inside the Stadium blob containers, and then the Stadium demo. And then I can open this, and as these are opening, for example, if you see the TXT, the incident, you can open one of these. You can see, for example, this is just simple synthetic data, but you can see it does contain some PII data. For example, you have an email and a phone number, and ideally, if you're going to be doing anything with this data downstream, they would want to redact the PII from these text files. And the same way we have CSV files, and for these CSV files, we'll just be loading them into OneLake. Right. So that's the data I'm working with. But beyond that, I also have a SQL database for Stadium operation, and basically the SQL database here contains some operations data for the Stadium operations. And I'm going to switch over to Microsoft Fabric, and here I do have a few workspaces. I have the Stadium operations workspace, which is what we're gonna start with. And if I switch over, I have my Lakehouse. Here, which is the Stadium operations Lakehouse. And inside here, the first thing I want to bring in my data from blob storage into OneLake without necessarily needing to move that data. So the reason I don't want to copy that data is because the CSV files inside of blob storage are continuously being updated. So we're continually adding new CSV files into blob storage, and so we do not want necessarily to move that data. Ideally, we will create an ETL pipeline for that, but shortcuts can easily make our lives to become much easier. And so we have two ways. If you've used the Lakehouse in Fabric before, you have the ability to bring in all your unstructured data in the form of files and to bring in all your structured data in the form of delta tables. So I'm going to bring in the CSV files in the form of delta tables, by creating delta tables for them inside here. And then for all the steward incidents, I'm going to bring those in as files inside here. So I'm going to create a new shortcut. So I'm just going to right click here and I can create a new, it should be here. And I can be able to bring in a new schema shortcut inside of the table. So select new schema shortcut, and you can see we have very many different sources where you can create shortcuts to, and this list is continuously we're continuously adding sources here. But for this demo, I'll be bringing data from blob storage, and I already have an existing connection. You can add a new connection, but I already have an existing connection that connects using my workspace identity. So I'm going to connect to blob storage. So this will be connecting to blob storage, and you can see it connects to the correct blob storage. And then inside there, we only have one container, the stadium demo, and we also have the steward incidents. So I want to bring in the CSV files, which is here, and I can toggle here the browse view or the path view. The path view is where I can just be able to provide the container in the subfolder directly and provide a shortcut name, or I can use the browse view where I can just browse myself. And so I want to create a shortcut to this particular folder inside of the container. I'm going to select that, and then once I do that, you can see it automatically detects this folder contains CSV files. And so I can be able to take this CSV file and automatically convert them or transform them from CSV to Delta. And I can be able to select schema options, either to add dynamic or fixed. And then the refresh type can be either I want to mirror or append. And for this case, I want to I want to append, and I'm not sure whether I showed you my CSV files, but if you check my CSV files, the top row contains the header. So I'm just going to select that the first row contains headers, and the delimiter is a comma, and I'm just going to leave everything else as is. And so if I select next, it's going to create a shortcut name. I can change this shortcut name from historical turnstiles, anything. I can be able to change that, but I'm just going to leave it as is, and I'm going to go ahead and click create. And this is going to create a shortcut. It's going to create a shortcut directly to, it's going to create a shortcut to blob storage and start bringing in the data here. So just give it a few. So yeah, you can be able to see this is doing the transformation, and I can be able to monitor here. You can see I can be able to monitor here and can see it's in progress. So I can see it's doing the mirroring, and that is in progress. So we're gonna leave this as it's doing the transform and bringing in the data here. And once it's done, we're gonna come back and check on that. So as that is happening, I'm going to go ahead and create another shortcut. So inside files, I'm going to create another shortcut. This time I'm still going to create a shortcut to blob storage. I'm going to create a shortcut to blob storage, still to the same storage container. And this time we are going to be bringing in data from the steward incidents subdirectory. And all these are text files. And I'm going to select next. Just a minute. Just a minute. We're going to bring them here. Create a new schema shortcut. And just we're gonna select the steward incidents. Wait a minute. Should be allowing me to create AI shortcut transforms. Let's try again. New shortcut. And I'm going to select Azure Blob Storage Stadium. And then I'm going to select next. I'm going to select the steward incident. Let's create the shortcut. And you can see this automatically creates the shortcut for us, and we can see the TXT files from Azure Blob Storage are showing up. This is still taking a while. We're going to give it a while, and then we're still not sure why. Let's try that again. I'm going to delete this shortcut, and let's try creating the shortcut again. So I'm going to create a new schema shortcut from Blob Storage. We're going to select the same, and then in this case I'm going to select this one, and then proceed, and then we're going to select as is, and then next, and then let's create this. This should be able to create this is going to go ahead and create the managed transformation, and should create the delta tables from the CSV files directly within Microsoft Fabric. And so just give this a few seconds. And ideally, what happens when you're creating this shortcut, and it's going to do the transformation from CSV to delta. There it is. Let's see if we're able to monitor the progress. So we're going to give it a while and just come back to it and confirm that the transform has actually completed. But ideally, Fabric is discovering the files through the shortcut. As you can see, the shortcut that we created here for the steward instance, the TXT files, these files are not moved. These are only DLS, but I can be able to visualize this file, or rather open these files directly from here. So the same way for this as this is doing the transform, what is happening is Fabric is discovering the files through the shortcut, and then it's going to be running this managed transformation. And once it runs the managed transformation, it's going to materialize the results into a delta table directly into our Lakehouse. And once that delta table is created in the Lakehouse, it's going to be queryable through Spark SQL or even Power BI without the need for me to actually go ahead and create a pipeline. So this says it's completed, so seems like it's completed, but still showing, still unable to show. Yeah, not sure why, but still unable to show it as a delta table. I'm gonna come back to this a little while later, but ideally ideally after the transform, because shows like seems like the transform is complete. After the transform, ideally what should happen should materialize the result of the transform as a delta table inside of our Lakehouse. Yeah, I'm still uncertain why that actually happened. Yeah. And was the transform actually completed? We're gonna give this one final run and just see whether the third time is a charm. Yeah, so one final time, and then I'm gonna switch over to mirroring. Let's try again. So we're gonna create a shortcut to Azure Blob Storage, and then I'm gonna select the historical turnstiles directory, and then it should automatically do the transform for us. And so, yep, it should automatically do that. I'm not going to change anything, and then create. And hopefully, I'm gonna come back to this again. Hopefully, if that time is a charm, that it actually does the transform successfully. Now, in the interest of time, I see we have less than 10 minutes to go. In the interest of time, the other thing I wanted to showcase is the concept of open mirroring or mirroring before we even get to open mirroring. So to add a mirror database, if I switch back to my workspace, let me switch back to my workspace here. I have created this mirror database, but to create a mirror database, it's as easy as creating a new item, and then search for mirrored database, and you have all these different supported sources for mirroring, from MySQL, Azure Cosmos DB, managed instance for Azure SQL or Azure SQL database. And if you select this, it's going to take you through the wizard for rather connecting to your Azure SQL database. So give this a minute, and so we're connecting this to Azure SQL database. I already have an existing connection. Let me copy the server name. And then this is the database, and then I already have the connection already stored. So I'm going to connect to that SQL database. And then once I connect to the SQL database, I just need to do a little bit of configuration. So it should connect to the data source, and then I need to select. To do a bit of configuration. So just give it a few minutes here, and maybe as this is running, I can show you an actual mirrored database that we actually had done before this. So this is connecting to the same. It's connecting to the same mirror. It's connecting to the same, and you can see it's the exact same database that we've connected to for mirroring. And you can see here, I can be able to monitor the replication down here. I'm just gonna remove a few of these things just to get a few. You can see I have a few tables inside of this database. I have the gate operation, security incidents, stadium zones, and you can see how many rows have actually been replicated. How many rows have actually been replicated inside of this database. And so this mirrored database, so this is a replica. You can see this is a replica for the actual database that I have on Azure SQL, and I can be able to explore the data that I actually have inside inside here. And just to know, this is not querying against my data on Azure SQL on Azure, but this is querying against this particular replica here. And this is a very good thing, because now my operational database is separate from anything that I would want to do analytics on top of the data that is in that particular operational database. And so with mirroring, it's going to continuously materialize the data, the data changes on your source database as delta tables inside of OneLake, and then it's going to do that continuously, and then you can be able to start querying this replica inside of OneLake. You can, for example, switch over to the SQL Analytics endpoint. I can switch over to the SQL Analytics endpoint, and I can query this particular data. I can query this particular data directly from Microsoft Fabric without needing to hit against my operational DB. Now, some things to mention. I did mention that the storage for this mirrored replica is free, up to a certain, I think up to 1 terabyte per CU, if I'm not wrong. But one thing to mention, that's the storage for the mirrored replica. But the compute for your background replication, the compute for your background replication is actually managed by Fabric, and then your query compute, like, so when I'm querying this particular replica, the query compute is going to be using your Fabric capacity. So that's something you need to keep in mind. Yes, the storage replica, the storage for the replica is free, but the compute, your query compute is going to use your Fabric capacity, and the background replication compute that is also managed by Microsoft Fabric. And you can see all the data that is actually coming in. This is all the data that is actually coming in from Fabric. And then some question that someone might be asking, maybe I have already set up I've set up my security using Azure SQL security. What happens to that when that data by that data, and what you need to understand is, once your data lands here, your data as it is on Azure SQL is actually present, but it is not protected by the same rules you had set up on Azure SQL. And so in that case, you will need to set up your security rules for this particular mirrored replica. So the point I'm trying to make here is that data mirroring, database mirroring, is actually replicating your data from your source database. So it's replicating that data, but it's not replicating your authorization model. So if you have RLS configured, CLS configured on your source database or object permissions, that has to be recreated deliberately inside of Microsoft Fabric. So you will have to do that directly inside of Microsoft Fabric, because that is not going to be replicated once that data lands inside of Microsoft Fabric. And to do that, it's as easy as, inside of this particular replica that I have manage OneLake security here. And if I click on this should open a wizard for me where I can do these actual configurations now inside of Fabric. And so possibly the rules that I had set, either RLS, possibly dynamic data masking, things like that, I've already set that on Azure SQL. I will need to do that inside of Microsoft Fabric as well, using the OneLake security. And OneLake security makes this very, very easy for you. And once I configure it here, this is going to be respected downstream. For example, if this data is going to be used in a Power BI report, or it's going to be used elsewhere or downstream for any other operations, that's going to be respected. And opening the OneLake security, I can be able to create my own custom roles. For example, I can go ahead and give a custom role here, select the type of permissions I'm going to grant here, or oh sorry, I closed that. Or you can see I already have two roles here. For example, I have this default reader role inside here, and you can be able to see this is sorry, this is a role that actually allows a user to have broad access, read access to the data. I can be able to select which members actually have access to this particular role. I can go back here, and I also have another role called the North Stand Operations role. So this is a custom role I created prior to this. And inside this role, you can do various configurations. For example, you can do things like table level access, and you can do things like table level access. You can configure things like row level access. You can be able to select different members that you would want to have in this role. Like for example, in this case, I'm the only member. I can go ahead and add possibly my colleague Someleze on the same role, and then I can come inside here and also edit the data. Here, for example, I have various tables inside here. I have a security schema and also have the DBO schema. I think the DBO schema has a few tables, and I think the security schema has only one table. Yeah, for example, I can select this table inside here, inside the DBO schema. I can select let's refresh this again. I can expand both of them. Let's see. Yeah, okay. All of them are expanded, so I can select all, and I can add the data. And once I add the data, I can, for example, what I've done now is I have selected that for these members inside here, they have access to all of these tables, but maybe I would have decided to exclude this particular table. So you have the ability to select which tables you can include for which particular roles as you're configuring them. But beyond that, for each of the tables, I can even go ahead and configure things like row level security. And I can be able to, for example, add, add a query directly here for role level access. For example, you can select sorry about that, close that by mistake. We can come back here and select the same role, and then inside the DBO table, let's, for example, select the stadium zones. And for example, here I can select the row level access. And for example, I can, where we can do, for example, zone ID. Okay, I'm having some trouble today with this canvas. Not sure why, but ideally, I will be able to put the query here and save that, and then I can be able to configure row level security the same way. I will be able to come and set column level access, and I can be able, for example, to hide some of these sensitive columns from different individuals. So you have the full capability to come and configure security, either row level security, column level access, or even table level access. And so what I try to show here is, the same will happen for the shortcuts. The same will happen for the shortcuts when we did the mirroring. So let's come back here. So this was the configuration for mirroring, but let's come and see whether whether the mirrored source actually works. So I'm still not sure why this doesn't work, but we're gonna investigate this after this live stream. But ideally, the moment it creates the same Delta table right here, you have the same option for managing OneLake security and configuring all those all those together. And ideally, if anything changed onto the shortcuts, for example, we added new CSV files, those will automatically the transformation will happen automatically. The same way, in case we had changes in our SQL database, the replica will automatically pick on those changes without the need for you to actually maintain a complex ETL pipeline for the same. Right, so that's a quick overview of what we had planned to cover today. It's a quick overview for what we had planned to cover today. And so just a quick recap of everything that we've gone through. Let me bring my slides again. Just a quick recap of everything that we have covered, and I'm going to minimize this. Just a quick recap of everything that we've covered. We've covered the various ways you can be able to bring in data into OneLake, and we've seen in some cases you have the ability to bring in data into OneLake without necessarily duplicating data or moving data from your source into OneLake, and how easy these two capabilities, mirroring and shortcuts, allow you to perform your normal ETL workflows without a lot of cumbersome workload in terms of maintaining all these without maintaining complex ETL pipelines. So thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I hope you've learned a thing or two around OneLake and shortcuts and shortcut transformations and AI shortcut transformations and mirroring. And I hope to see you again next week for our next session as well, for our next session on the series. Thank you all.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for answering the questions in the chat. And thank you all for joining. We're always looking to improve your experience. So if you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find the link to our survey on the screen or in the chat. We will see you next week on the next session.